Velthara looked out the window of the command ship and saw the small blue planet below. It looked peaceful. The green and brown patches showed where the humans lived. Small cities dotted the surface like tiny lights. Nothing about this world seemed dangerous. Another easy day, she thought to herself. Velthara had done this job for 20 years. She was a military analyst for the Galactic Hegemony. Her job was simple. Watch new species and see how they reacted when the hegemony came to visit. It was always the same. The aliens would panic, then surrender, then join the Empire. Easy. The planet below was called New Busan by its people. The humans had lived there for about 50 years. Intelligence reports said they had basic technology, nothing special. They grew food, built simple houses, and lived quiet lives. There were only 50,000 of them on the whole planet. Perfect for a quick operation, High Commander Mordek had said earlier. We'll be done in a few hours, Velthara believed him. In her 20 years, she had never seen a species fight back for more than a day. Why would they? The hegemony had ships that could destroy cities. They had weapons that could crack planets. Any smart species would take one look and give up. She pulled up the files on humans again. They were a young species, barely into space travel. They had only been off their home world for about 200 years. Their technology was primitive. Their weapons were basic. Their ships were slow and clunky. Nothing to worry about, she said to her assistant. The communication officer's voice came over the speakers. High Commander, we are in position. Ready to send the standard message. Do it, Mordek replied. Velthara had heard this message thousands of times. It was the same for every new species. The hegemony would announce themselves, explain their power, and offer peace in exchange for surrender. Most species said yes within minutes. The message went out to the planet below. People of New Busan, this is the Galactic Hegemony. We come in peace, but with great power. Your planet is now part of our empire. Surrender your weapons and governments. Accept our rule and you will be protected and cared for. Refuse and face the consequences. You have 1 hour to decide. Velthara settled back in her chair to wait. Usually the response came quickly. Fear made most species think fast. They would see the huge ships in the sky and know they had no choice. But something felt different this time. An hour passed. Then another. The humans were taking longer than usual to respond. Velthara checked her instruments. The planet below showed normal activity. People were moving around their cities. Ships were flying between settlements. It didn't look like panic. Strange, she thought. They should be scared by now. Finally, after 3 hours, a message came from the planet. It was short and simple. We thank you for your offer, but we must decline. Please leave our system. We wish you safe travels. Velthara stared at the message. She read it again. Then a third time. Decline? She whispered. In 20 years, no species had ever declined. They might ask for more time or try to negotiate, but decline? That was impossible. High Commander Mordek looked just as confused. Did they understand the message? He asked. The communication officer checked his systems. Yes, sir. They received it clearly. They even thanked us for it. Thanked us. Mordek's voice rose. They thanked us for threatening them. Velthara pulled up her scanners and looked at the planet again. The humans were definitely moving around down there, but they weren't running or hiding. If anything, they seemed more active than before. Sir, the scanner operator called out, I'm seeing unusual activity on the surface. They appear to be organizing something. Organizing what? Mordek demanded. I'm not sure, sir, but they're moving equipment around. Large groups of people are gathering in the cities and, sir, they're singing. Singing? Velthara couldn't believe what she was hearing. During a military threat, she adjusted her own scanners to listen to the radio waves coming from the planet. Sure enough, human voices were singing something. The words were in their language, but her translator made sense of it. It was something about standing together and never giving up. This makes no sense, she said to herself. Every species in the galaxy had the same basic response to overwhelming danger. Fear. Fear made creatures smart. Fear made them think about survival. Fear made them surrender when they couldn't win. But these humans didn't sound afraid. They sounded determined. Mordek was getting angry. Send the message again. Maybe they didn't understand. The communication officer sent the same message. This time the humans responded faster. We understood your first message clearly. Our answer remains the same. We decline your offer. Please leave. Velthara felt a chill run through her body. This was wrong. This was against everything she knew about intelligent life. No species chose destruction over survival. It was impossible. But as she watched the planet below, she saw the humans building something. They were putting up barriers around their cities. They were moving vehicles into defensive positions. Some of the settlements were even evacuating their children to safer areas. "They are preparing to fight," she said quietly. Mordek heard her. "Fight? With what?" "Our ships could destroy their entire planet." "I know, sir. But that's what they're doing." The High Commander was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke into his communicator. "All ships prepare for standard pacification protocol. These humans need to learn what happens when they refuse the hegemony." Velthera watched the weapon systems come online. Soon the humans would see real power. They would see what the hegemony could do. Then they would surrender like every other species. But deep in her mind, a small voice whispered that something was different about these creatures, something that made them act in ways that made no sense, something that might change everything. As the hegemony ships moved into attack position, Velthera saw lights appearing all over the human planet, not emergency lights or panic signals. They looked almost like celebration lights. "What are they doing down there?" she whispered. She was about to find out that humans were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and that some species didn't fight because they thought they could win. Some species fought because they believed they were right. The first bombs fell at dawn. Velthera watched from her station as bright flashes lit up the human cities below. The hegemony's orbital bombardment was precise and controlled, just enough to show power, not enough to destroy everything. It was meant to scare the humans into surrender. High Commander Mordek had chosen 3 small military targets: a communication tower, a vehicle depot, and a power station. Simple buildings that could be rebuilt easily. The message was clear. "This is what we can do if you don't give up." "That should do it," Mordek said with satisfaction. "No species can watch their infrastructure get destroyed and still think about fighting." Velthera expected to see panic on her scanners. She expected radio calls for help, people running, governments calling for immediate surrender. That's what always happened. But the scanners showed something else entirely. Instead of running away from the destroyed buildings, humans were running toward them. Groups of people rushed to the smoking ruins, not in panic but in organized teams. They were pulling survivors from the wreckage and putting out fires. "Sir," the scanner operator said, "the humans are conducting rescue operations. They're not evacuating." Mordek frowned. "Give them time. The shock will set in soon." But an hour passed and still no surrender came. Instead, something impossible started happening. A human voice came over the radio. It was calm and clear. "This is Taimin of the New Busan Defense Council. We have received your demonstration. We are sorry for your losses, but our answer remains the same. Please leave our system." "Sorry for our losses?" Mordek exploded. "We attacked them." Velthara was studying her readings more carefully now. The human settlement patterns were changing, but not the way they should. Instead of hiding, they were spreading out in organized formations. Instead of chaos, she saw planning. "Sir," she said quietly, "I think they're preparing defensive positions." "Defensive positions?" Mordek laughed. "Against orbital bombardment? That's insane." But as Velthara watched, she saw exactly that. The humans were digging trenches around their cities. They were moving their important equipment underground. More strangely, they were singing again. The radio waves from the planet carried dozens of human voices singing together. Her translator told her the words, "We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday." Overcome what? She wondered. "Overcome us?" A new voice joined the radio chatter. "This is Sora, Communications Coordinator. All settlements, please report status." One by one, human voices responded. "Settlement Alpha ready. Settlement Beta ready. Settlement Gamma ready." They didn't sound scared. They sounded eager. Mordek was getting angry. "Send down the ground troops. Let them see our soldiers up close. That will change their minds." The first wave of hegemony soldiers landed outside the largest human city. They were professionals, well-armed, well-trained, and experienced in pacification operations. They had never failed to secure a surrender, but as they approached the city, something unexpected happened. The humans didn't hide behind their barriers. Instead, a small group walked out to meet the soldiers. They carried a white flag, but they also carried weapons. Not powerful weapons, Just simple rifles and pistols that couldn't hurt armored hegemony troops. The human delegation stopped about 50 meters from the soldiers. One of them, a big man with steady eyes, stepped forward. "I'm Jinwoo," he said. "I speak for this city. We've prepared food and water for your troops. When you're ready to leave, we'll provide safe passage back to your ships." The hegemony captain was so surprised he forgot his training for a moment. "Food and water? We're here to conquer you," Jinwoo nodded. "We understand that's what you think you're doing. But we won't be conquered. So when you get tired of trying, we'll help you go home." Velthara was listening to this conversation through the soldiers' communication system. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The human was offering hospitality to an invasion force. The captain regained his composure. "Surrender your weapons and submit to hegemony authority." "No," Jinwoo said simply. "But we're still willing to share food." The captain gave the order to advance. The soldiers moved toward the city, expecting the humans to run or surrender. Instead, something completely unprecedented happened. The humans opened fire. Not with advanced weapons or superior tactics. They used simple guns and homemade explosives. Their equipment was primitive and their training was basic. But they fought. More importantly, they fought without fear. Velthara watched the battle through drone cameras and couldn't understand what she was seeing. Hegemony soldiers were trained and equipped to handle resistance. But they were trained to fight enemies who wanted to survive. The humans fought differently. When a position became impossible to hold, they didn't retreat. They held it anyway. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they didn't surrender. They threw rocks. A small human woman named Hee-jin appeared on the battlefield carrying explosives. She was running toward a hegemony tank, not away from it. The tank's gunner had a clear shot and took it. But Hee-jin kept running even as bullets hit the ground around her. She reached the tank and placed her explosives. The blast destroyed the tank and killed her instantly. "Why?" Velthara whispered. "Why would she do that?" The battle raged for hours. The humans were losing. They had to be losing. Their weapons were weaker, their armor was thinner, and their numbers were smaller. But they kept fighting. Even stranger, they kept helping each other. Human medics ran into gunfire to rescue wounded soldiers. Human engineers fixed weapons while under attack. Human civilians brought food and ammunition to the fighters. As the day wore on, Velthara realized something that made her stomach cold with fear. The humans weren't trying to win. They were trying to make winning cost too much. Every hegemony advance required enormous effort. Every captured building was destroyed before the soldiers could use it. Every victory came with such heavy losses that it felt like defeat. By evening, the hegemony forces controlled most of the city. But they had lost more soldiers in one day than in the previous 10 operations combined, and the humans were still fighting. Even worse, radio chatter from other human settlements suggested they weren't planning to surrender either. If anything, they sounded more determined than before. High Commander Mordek called off the ground assault as darkness fell. "We'll resume tomorrow," he announced. "They'll be more reasonable after a night to think about their losses." But Velthara didn't think the humans would be more reasonable tomorrow. She thought they would be exactly the same as today. Impossible to understand, impossible to predict, and impossible to defeat through normal methods. As she prepared her daily report, she tried to find words to describe what she had witnessed. How could she explain that a species existed that didn't fear death the way every other intelligent creature did? How could she warn the hegemony that they had found something completely new, something that might change everything they thought they knew about war, peace, and the nature of intelligent life itself? 3 weeks had passed since the first battle, and Velthara could not sleep. The simple pacification mission had become a nightmare. What should have been a few hours of demonstration followed by surrender had turned into a grinding war that made no sense to anyone in the hegemony fleet. The humans were still fighting. Worse than that, they were getting better at it. Velthara stared at her reports, trying to understand what she was seeing. The humans had no formal military. Their leader, Tai-min, had been a mining engineer before this started. Sora had run communication systems for cargo ships. Jinwoo had worked in construction. Hee-jin had been a demolition expert for building projects. None of them were soldiers. Yet somehow, they were holding off one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. "I need to understand them," she told High Commander Mordek. "I request permission to interview prisoners." Mordek looked tired. The easy victory he had promised was turning into a disaster that would ruin his career. Fine. Maybe you can find out what's wrong with them. The hegemony had captured 12 humans during the fighting. Most species prisoners would be broken by now, ready to tell their captors anything in exchange for mercy. But when Velthara walked into the holding area, she found something completely different. The humans were singing, not sad songs or prayers for rescue. They were singing the same song she had heard from the planet, "We shall overcome." Their voices were strong and clear. Even though some of them were wounded, Velthara chose to interview a pilot named Wu Jin. He had been shot down while trying to ram his small ship into a hegemony cruiser. The attempt had failed, but it had damaged the cruiser's weapon systems. Now he sat in a medical chair, his leg in a cast, still humming that strange song. "Why are you singing?" she asked him. Wu Jin looked at her with curious eyes. "Why wouldn't I be singing? You're a prisoner. You're probably going to die. Your people are losing a war they can't win." "Are we losing?" Wu Jin asked. "It doesn't feel like losing." Velthara pulled up her reports on her tablet. "Your city has been bombed dozens of times. Your military installations are destroyed. Your government buildings are in ruins. Half your people are refugees. How is that not losing?" Wu Jin was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "You don't understand what we're fighting for, do you?" "Survival," Velthara said immediately. "All intelligent creatures fight for survival." "No," Wu Jin said gently. "We're not fighting to survive. We're fighting to remain free." Velthara felt confused. "What's the difference?" "Survival means staying alive no matter what. Freedom means staying human no matter what. That makes no sense. If you're dead, you can't be free." Wu Jin leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. "If you're alive but not free, you're not really living. My great-grandfather told me stories about Earth before we came to the stars. There were times when humans had to choose between safety and freedom. They always chose freedom, even when it meant death, especially when it meant death. Because once you show that you'll trade freedom for safety, you'll never have either one." Velthara studied his face, looking for signs of the madness that must be causing this illogical thinking. But Wu Jin looked completely sane. More than that, he looked peaceful. "But you have families," she said. "Children. Don't you want to live to see them grow up?" "Of course I do. But I want them to grow up free even more. If we surrender now, what kind of world do we leave for them? A world where their parents gave up when things got hard? A world where their parents chose life over death? A world where their parents chose slavery over freedom?" Wu Jin corrected. "That's not a gift. That's a curse." Velthara felt a chill run through her body. She had spent her entire career studying different species, and she thought she understood how intelligence worked. All thinking creatures had the same basic drive: survive and reproduce. Everything else was secondary. But these humans seemed to have priorities that came before survival. Ideas they valued more than their own lives. "Tell me about Hyejin," she said. "The woman who destroyed the tank." Wu Jin's expression grew sad but proud. "Hyejin was my friend. She had 2 children, a boy and a girl. She loved them more than anything in the universe. Then why did she kill herself to destroy one tank? Because she saw that tank heading toward the school where children were hiding. She couldn't stop it any other way. But now her children are orphans. Now her children are free," Wu Jin said firmly, "and they know their mother died to keep them that way. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of." Velthara felt sick. This conversation was making her question everything she thought she knew about intelligent behavior. "What about Taimin? He's your leader. Surely he thinks about victory and defeat in rational terms." Wu Jin laughed, but it wasn't a bitter laugh. It was warm and genuine. "Taimin is the most rational person I know. He calculated the odds of winning this war on the first day. And 0, we can't win. We don't have the ships, the weapons, or the technology. Taimin told us that right from the beginning. Then why are you fighting?" "Because we can't lose either." Velthara stared at him. "That's impossible. Either you win or you lose." "No," Wu Jin said. "We lose if we stop being who we are. We lose if we let fear make our choices for us. We lose if we teach our children that freedom isn't worth defending. As long as we keep fighting for what we believe in, we can't lose. Even if you all die. Even if we all die. Because the idea will survive. Other humans will hear about New Busan. They'll know that when the hegemony came, we said no. They'll know that some things are worth dying for." Velthara left the interview feeling more confused than when she started. She had hoped to find some weakness in human psychology that the hegemony could exploit. Instead, she had found something that terrified her. The humans weren't fighting despite their fear. They weren't fighting because they thought they could win. They were fighting because they believed it was right, regardless of the consequences. That night, she sent a classified report to Hegemony Command that would change the course of galactic history. The humans represent a fundamental threat to hegemony operations. They do not respond to standard intimidation tactics because they value abstract concepts more than personal survival. They cannot be conquered through traditional means because they do not define victory and defeat the way other species do. Recommend immediate withdrawal and quarantine of human space. These creatures are psychologically incompatible with rational civilization. But even as she wrote those words, Velthara knew it was too late. The humans had already changed something in the galaxy. They had proven that some species would rather die free than live as slaves, and that idea, once released, could never be contained. The message came at 3 a.m, ship time. Velthara was pulled from her uneasy sleep by emergency alarms. She rushed to the command center, expecting to hear that the humans had finally surrendered. Instead, she found chaos. Report, High Commander Mordek demanded as officers scrambled around the bridge. Sir, we're detecting multiple ships approaching the system. Unknown configuration, but they're broadcasting human identification codes. Velthara felt her stomach drop. More humans. How many? 17 ships so far, sir. More appearing every hour. Mordek studied the display screen with growing alarm. What kind of ships? Mixed types, sir. Some appear to be cargo vessels. Others look like mining ships. A few might be passenger transports. None of them are military grade. Reinforcements? Mordek asked. The scanner operator shook his head. Sir, these ships are coming from different directions. Different human colonies. It's like they're responding to a call for help. Velthara moved to her station and began analyzing the new arrivals. What she saw made no sense. The ships were exactly what the operator had described, civilian vessels that had been hastily modified with weapons and armor. Nothing that should threaten a hegemony fleet, but there were so many of them. How did word spread so fast? Mordek demanded. We've been jamming all communications from the planet. Sir, the communication officer said quietly. We've been monitoring radio transmissions from the planet. The humans have been broadcasting on multiple frequencies telling other human worlds about the situation. And instead of fleeing, they're coming here? Mordek's voice was rising. Why would they fly toward a battle they can't win? Velthara was asking herself the same question. She had studied the psychological profiles of hundreds of species. When faced with overwhelming force, intelligent creatures had 3 basic responses: fight, flight, or freeze. But they only fought when they thought they could win, or when they had no choice. These humans had a choice. They could have stayed safely in their own systems. Instead, they were deliberately flying toward certain death. The first wave of human ships arrived that afternoon. Instead of attacking immediately, they took defensive positions around New Busan. It was almost like they were creating a shield around the planet. Then something even stranger happened. The human ships started broadcasting music, not military communications or tactical information, music, songs. The same songs Velthara had been hearing from the planet for weeks. They're singing again, she whispered. One of the newly arrived ships hailed the hegemony fleet directly. The voice that came through was calm and friendly. Hegemony vessels, this is Captain Minho of the cargo ship Determination. We're here to assist our friends on New Busan. We'd like to offer you the same deal they did. Safe passage out of the system when you're ready to leave. Mordek was speechless for a moment. Then he activated the communication system. You're surrounded by the most powerful fleet in this sector. You have no weapons that can threaten us. What makes you think you can dictate terms? We're not trying to dictate terms, Minho replied. We're offering you a way out that lets everyone keep their dignity. Your people are dying down there. Your planet is under siege. Yes, Minho said sadly. War is always tragic. But some things are more important than avoiding tragedy. More ships kept arriving. By the end of the day, there were over 40 human vessels in the system. By the end of the week, there were more than 100. Velthara watched in growing horror as the situation spiraled beyond all hegemony experience. These weren't trained soldiers coming to fight a war. These were ordinary people, farmers, merchants, miners, teachers, who had abandoned their normal lives to join a hopeless battle. The worst part was that they seemed happy about it. The radio chatter between human ships was full of laughter and jokes. They shared stories about their families back home. They sang songs together across the vast distances of space. They acted like this was some kind of celebration instead of a military disaster. "Sir," the intelligence officer reported, "we're detecting more ships approaching from 3 different human systems. Estimate over 200 additional vessels." Mordek looked like he was about to have a breakdown. 200?
How many humans are there?
Current intelligence suggests approximately 47 human-controlled systems, sir. Total population estimated at 15 billion. And how many of them are coming here? Unknown, sir. But based on current patterns, possibly all of them. Belthera felt a chill of absolute terror. The idea that an entire species might voluntarily fly towards certain death was beyond anything in her experience. It violated every principle of intelligent behavior. But that's exactly what seemed to be happening. The human strategy, if it could be called that, was completely insane. Individual ships would break away from the main group and attack hegemony vessels. They would ram damaged ships into larger ones. They would sacrifice themselves to take out single weapon systems. Each attack was militarily insignificant, but there were so many attacks from so many directions that the hegemony fleet was slowly being worn down. Even worse, the humans were learning. Each wave of attackers was slightly more effective than the last. They were sharing information, adapting tactics, and finding new ways to turn civilian ships into weapons. Taemin's voice came over the radio during one particularly intense battle. "All ships, this is New Busan Control. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their fleet. We're trying to make them understand that conquering us costs more than leaving us alone." Belthera realized that this was exactly what was happening. The hegemony had lost more ships in this one system than in the previous 100 operations combined. The financial cost was enormous. The political cost was even worse. For the first time in 3,000 years, hegemony forces were taking significant casualties in a pacification mission. Other species would hear about this. They would start asking dangerous questions. "Sir," she said to Mordek, "we need to consider withdrawal." "Withdrawal?" Mordek's voice was sharp. "We don't withdraw from primitive species. Sir, they're not acting like a primitive species. They're acting like..." She paused, trying to find the right words. "Like something we've never seen before." On the screen, another wave of human ships was approaching. These ones were broadcasting a new song. Her translator told her the words, "When the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh Lord, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in." "What's a saint?" she asked her computer. The answer made her feel sick. A person recognized as holy or virtuous and regarded as being in heaven after death. The humans were singing about going to heaven. They were singing about dying, and they sounded joyful about it. Belthera realized that the hegemony had encountered something completely outside their understanding. A species that didn't just accept death. They embraced it when it served their principles. How do you conquer people who consider death in battle to be a privilege? How do you intimidate creatures who see martyrdom as the highest honor? How do you defeat an enemy that becomes stronger every time you kill them? As another wave of human ships sang their way into battle, Belthera began writing the report that would change galactic history forever. The evacuation order came on a Tuesday. Belthera read the message 3 times before she believed it. For the first time in galactic hegemony history, a pacification fleet was withdrawing from a primitive world without achieving surrender. High Commander Mordek stood in the center of the command bridge, his uniform wrinkled and his eyes hollow. He had aged 10 years in the past 2 months. "All ships prepare for immediate departure from the New Busan system." The bridge crew worked in stunned silence. Nobody spoke about what this meant, but everyone understood. The mighty hegemony, conqueror of 847 species, was running away from a group of humans with primitive ships and improvised weapons. "Sir," the communication officer said quietly, "we're receiving a message from the planet." Mordek closed his eyes. "Put it through." Taemin's voice filled the bridge. He sounded tired but calm. "Hegemony Fleet, this is New Busan. We want to thank you for the opportunity to know ourselves better. War is terrible, but it showed us who we really are. We hope you found what you were looking for, too. Safe travels to you and your families. The bridge remained silent. Even in victory, the humans were offering kindness to their enemies. Velthara watched through the viewports as the hegemony ships pulled away from the blue planet. Behind them, hundreds of human vessels maintained their defensive positions. They weren't celebrating or cheering. They were just waiting to see if the hegemony would really leave. 3 months later, Velthara sat in a secure briefing room on the hegemony capital world. Around the table were the most powerful military and political leaders in known space. Her report lay open in front of each of them. "Explain to me again," said Supreme Admiral Kethvar, "how a species with primitive technology held off our most advanced fleet." Velthara had given this briefing dozens of times, but it never got easier. "They didn't defeat us through superior technology or tactics. They defeated us through superior will." "Will? What does that mean?" "Every species we've conquered fights for survival. They calculate odds, weigh costs and benefits, and surrender when resistance becomes too expensive. Humans fight for concepts that exist only in their minds." Fleet Commander Zolthan leaned forward. "Concepts like what?" "Freedom, dignity, the right to make their own choices. They believe these ideas are more important than their individual lives." "That's impossible," Zolthan said flatly. "No intelligent species values abstractions over survival. The humans do. I interviewed prisoners who were willing to die rather than admit their cause was wrong. I watched pilots ram their ships into our vessels, not because they thought it would win the war, but because they thought it was right." Supreme Admiral Kethvar studied the casualty reports. "We lost 37 ships, nearly 10,000 personnel, all to conquer one primitive planet. And we failed," added Political Director Morseth. "For the first time in 3,000 years, we failed to complete a pacification mission." Velthara nodded. "But the real problem isn't what happened at New Busan. The real problem is what's happening now." She activated a holographic display showing star charts. Red dots marked areas of concern throughout hegemony space. Since news of the human resistance spread, we've had 17 independence movements start up among previously conquered species. 4 colonial worlds have declared themselves free republics. The Zenthari sector is an open revolt. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "They're copying the humans," Morseth whispered. "Worse than that," Velthara said. "They're learning from the humans. The idea that some things are worth dying for is spreading faster than we can contain it." Supreme Admiral Kethvar stood up and walked to the star chart. "What do you recommend?" Velthara had been dreading this question for months. "Complete quarantine of human space. No contact, no trade, no communication. We declare the entire human region a forbidden zone." "Quarantine?" Zolthan laughed. "We're going to quarantine a species because they're too stubborn to conquer? We're going to quarantine a species because their ideas are more dangerous than their weapons," Velthara said firmly. "The concept of voluntary death for abstract principles is like a virus. Once it spreads, it destroys everything we've built." Fleet Commander Zolthan was studying the casualty reports again. "What about revenge? We can't let them get away with humiliating the hegemony. Revenge requires engaging with them. Any engagement risks further exposure to their psychological contamination. The only safe response is complete avoidance." Political Director Morseth was looking at the rebellion reports. "What about the species that are already infected with human ideas?" "We negotiate. We offer them more autonomy within the hegemony structure. We make resistance more expensive than cooperation, but we don't try to crush them completely. That just creates more martyrs." Supreme Admiral Kethvar turned back to the table. "You're telling me that the most powerful military force in galactic history needs to change its entire strategy because of one small species?" "Yes," Velthara said simply. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." The quarantine order was signed that day. A buffer zone of 50 light-years was established around human space. Any ship attempting to cross the boundary would be destroyed without warning. Officially, it was described as containing a dangerous plague. In a way, that was true. 5 years later, Velthara received her final assignment, monitoring the quarantine zone from a distant observation post. Her job was to watch for any signs that humans were trying to expand beyond their borders. What she found was the opposite. The humans weren't trying to expand. They were building, trading between their own worlds, creating art and music, raising families, living free lives behind their invisible prison. Sometimes human ships would approach the quarantine boundary, but they never tried to cross it. Instead, they would broadcast messages toward hegemony space, not threats or demands, but simple greetings. Hello out there. We hope you're well. We hope you're free. The messages always ended the same way. Remember, some things are worth more than safety. Some things are worth everything. Velthar had spent her entire career believing that intelligence meant choosing survival over everything else. The humans had taught her that true intelligence might mean choosing principles over survival. As she wrote her final report, she wondered if the hegemony had really won or lost at New Busan. They had avoided conquest, it was true. But they had also learned something that could never be unlearned. They had learned that freedom was possible. In her last entry, she wrote, "The humans remain contained behind the quarantine boundary. They pose no military threat to hegemony space. However, the ideas they represent continue to spread throughout our territory. We have successfully prevented human expansion, but we cannot prevent human inspiration." Recommendation: monitor the situation closely. The age of easy conquest is over. We now live in a galaxy where some species would rather die free than live as slaves. This changes everything. She sealed the report and looked out at the stars, wondering how many worlds were learning, even now, that some things were worth fighting for, some things were worth dying for, some things were worth living for, free.